As someone who's climbed the ranked ladder all the way from unranked to radiant, I've seen every mistake you could possibly make. From bad mechanics, bad positioning, bad utility, bad game sense, and even bad decision making. So in today's video, I'm going to tell you 20 mistakes that you probably make and how you can fix them. The first and most common mistake I see players making is not getting enough info on defense and just sitting in corners hoping an enemy walks into their crosshair. There are a ton of different ways to get info safely, like jump peeking, using a Sova dart or drone, or even a fade haunt. You get the picture here. A lack of information is never a good thing, so use your utility a little more efficiently in order to safely figure out what the other team's game plan is for the round, so you'll be able to communicate for early rotations or even rotate off the site yourself. Now, another mistake players tend to make in the lower ranks is allowing themselves to be isolated with zero trade potential. When pushing site or even on defense, you always want to position yourself in a way so if you lose a fight, you've got a teammate that'll trade you. This ensures you are never at a disadvantage and can be extremely game-changing if you implement it into your gameplay. Try to be aware of where your teammates are positioned. Glance at your minimap every now and then. Communicate with them. Ask them to be ready to trade you if you're ready to take a duel. This next mistake, while it sounds like common sense, somehow it's not. When coaching lower ranked players, I often see them using weapons incorrectly. And what I mean by this is if you're using a specific weapon, you have to have a plan in mind on how to position yourself so you can take a duel that's in your favor. For example, if you have a stinger, would you fight someone B-long on Pearl? Instead, if you had a judge, you may play behind the screen, or even mid-link or art, and it would be far more effective. This goes for all weapons, like the Spectre, Stinger, Shorty, or whatever weapon you're using. Always try to make a plan for how you're going to position yourself to get the most impact possible in the round, regardless of the weapon. This next mistake is for our duelist mains, especially for you Jet and Neon mains. Since you guys have movement abilities, you will of course end up further ahead of your teammates while entering. But just because you can dash through a smoke doesn't mean your team can do the same. So make sure not to tilt when your teammates don't run through immediately, because not every entry is a good one. Since you're the entry, it's your job to figure out if it's a good idea to go in or not. If you lead your team into a 3v5 where they have to run through a molly and are getting tagged by a silver recon on the other side, they might not be as eager to follow you in the future. Assess the situation, and sometimes rotating might be the correct decision. Now let's talk about crouching. There's a big myth that crouching is bad, but in fact, it can be very useful. However, the mistake that low elo players tend to make is instant crouching. The problem with instant crouching is it commits you to a fight, and it makes you an easier target. The only time you should be crouching is if it's an isolated 1v1 fight or if you're fighting someone who's strafing. For example, if you're peeking out of hookah on bind towards market, you see two enemies holding the angle. Crouching is the absolute worst thing you could do. Instead, you should go for a shot and attempt to fall back. Or if you're holding an angle and the enemy wide swings it, crouching makes you a stationary target while the enemy's a moving one, and this puts the fight in their favor. Understanding when to crouch and when not to crouch is what most players struggle with. So if you can understand when it's best to crouch, it's going to put you ahead of other players in your rank. Another big mistake I constantly see is players quickly switching to melee. Often, it's going to get people killed. They're not ready to take a fight, and realistically, it does nothing for you. And I know, it's a tough habit to break, but trust us on this one. We promise. I also tend to see people play whatever agent the team needs, but in my opinion, this is actually counterproductive. Playing an agent you're uncomfortable with can lead to poor performance, and also lead to tilting, which is a huge mistake. Personally, I suggest never filling and only playing with a few agents you can master. Watch guides, practice them in game. It makes it so you never have to think about how to use your utility because it's just second nature at that point. Being comfortable, it allows you to not have to second guess yourself and leads you to having more confidence, and confidence is key. For our next mistake. This one's for my controller mains. Smokes are often thrown wrong, even in immortal lobbies. The entire point of a smoke is to block a line of sight for an enemy while also making it so if they push through it, they'll be punished. But I still constantly see players throwing smokes way too deep and then giving free space to lurk out through the smoke and catch their team off guard. Instead, you want to place your smoke right at the choke point. So if anyone attempts to push through, they'll be instantly punished. And for everything else you need to climb ranks and improve fast, there's SkillCapped. We take the highest priority skills to climb ranks fast, like aiming, and then we break it down in a step-by-step course that's easy to understand. You'll not only learn the basics like crosshair placement and clearing angles properly, but also more advanced concepts like getting more multi-kills and repositioning. These courses have been getting 5-star reviews from users just like you, raving at how helpful they are. That's not all though. Every week, we release 6 brand new VOD reviews where Radiant coaches teach you how to climb out of the exact rank that you're stuck in. And if you're looking for something a little more personal instead, well, we've got you covered with our brand new one-on-one coaching on our SkillCapped Discord. All of this seems too good to be true. Well, don't worry, we're backed by a rank up guarantee. If you don't significantly improve while actively using SkillCapped, you get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below and get the rank you've always wanted. Alright, let's get into the guide. For our next mistake, it's the most common one I see at almost any rank. When in a post-plant situation, there's almost no reason to take a fight when you have an advantage. But for some reason, players get a little bit too kill hungry and overextend, and then they throw the round. Now, there are a few different ways that you can secure a post-plant. The first, most obvious ones, using things like a Sova ultimate, Brimstone ultimate, or Molly lineups. But you can also set up a crossfire with a teammate, so when the enemy team attempts to retake, they end up sandwiched between the two of you, and they have no chance not to be traded. People also commonly fail to understand how angle advantage works. And what I mean by this is if you're closer to an angle than the enemy, they're going to see you first. In fact, there are even certain angles where you can't see an enemy at all, and they're able to see you. So when you're getting ready to peek someone, make sure to position yourself as far away from the angle as possible, so you don't end up getting punished by this. This also works in a slightly different way. The closer you are to an angle, the faster an enemy will appear to be moving. Even though they're moving at the exact same speed, no matter the distance, they will appear faster because their perceived motion will be slower the further away they are in your field of view. Our next mistake we're talking about would be players half clearing angles. Commonly, when players will check a corner or an angle where a player could be, they don't actually commit to clearing it and instantly turn away and get punished. When it comes to clearing angles and understanding them, you need to commit to clearing the angle fully while trying to make an effort to not expose yourself to other angles as best as possible. Especially if you're the first person entering the site, it's your job to clear the close angles. If you don't, an enemy could very easily show some slight trigger discipline and end up getting multiple kills on you and your teammates who now think it's clear. Speaking of which, I see a lot of players using their jet clash incorrectly when entering onto a site. Most of them think just dashing into a smoke is the best way to entry. But for example, on Ascent, if you were to dash towards Switch while dashing, you should be moving your mouse left and right. It allows you to clear close angles while you're mid-dash, making you a harder target to hit while also giving your team valuable info. This one's an easy fix, but I tend to notice quite a few players trying to find the perfect opportunity to use their ultimate, and it never comes, so they just end up not using it at all. Since your ultimate will only gain points when you don't already have it, it's usually best on most agents to just use it as soon as possible, and then you can start working towards it again in the same half. So once you get your ultimate, make a game plan on how you're going to use it. For example, if you have a Viper ultimate, tell your team you're going to Viper ult that round. On defense, this could free up teammates to cover other positions, and on offense, it could let them know that their win condition is getting you on site. It's a simple but incredibly effective way to create a game plan and get your team on the same page. Now, this mistake is probably one of the most common ones in lower elos, and it involves movement. Many players shift peek angles because they don't want to make a noise while peeking. But you can actually silently peek an angle while strafing without holding your walk key. There's a slight dead zone that all you high elo players abuse to strafe while being silent. We call this the two-step method. If your strafe is under 2 steps, you'll be completely silent while being a much harder target to hit than a walking one. This one's gonna take some practice until you fully understand how much you can strafe while silent. So load up a custom game and try this one out for yourself. Another big mistake I see players make is what people refer to as COD reloading, which is when players reload their weapon when they still have more than enough ammo left in their clip. You know what? Even I'm guilty of this. This often gets people killed because while you're reloading, enemies might be looking for a trade on the kill you just got. It is incredibly important to not reload unless you're certain that you're safe or unless you absolutely need to. And when reloading, you should also be incredibly afraid of enemies hunting you down. Good players will try to take this opportunity to close the gap on you. Another crucial mistake I see players making is being very one-dimensional and this can affect every agent role. For example, if you're using the same Cypher setup or Killjoy setup every single round, any smart enemy will know exactly how to counter it. The same way that if you try to play Molly lineups every round, any smart enemy would know that they need to retake faster to counter you. I frequently see players get punished for making the same play multiple times over and over and then continue to make that same play they were punished for. This is a huge problem because if the enemy adapts to the plays you're making and you have a one-dimensional playstyle, you're not going to be able to change it up efficiently and can easily lose your team the game. It's also good to be able to identify your opponent's tendencies, so you can abuse players that are constantly making repetitive plays and gain an advantage for your team instead. Let's talk about dry peeking. This is a key mistake that many low-ranked players struggle with, especially against an AWPer. Dry peeking is a term we use to describe peeking an angle without the use of any ability. Especially if an enemy has an AWP, whether you think you're better than them or not, the best way to deal with them is to use utility to either flash them or drone them to see if it's safe first. You always want to give yourself the best opportunity to get a frag, and it's harder for an enemy to hit you. Most players are going to die with utility every round anyway, so it's a lot better to be safe than sorry. This next mistake is one of the most common ones I see in low elo, walling mid on Sage at the very start of the round. This wall gets instantly broken and has close to no value in the round, and the whole point of Sage wall is to stop people from being able to rotate through mid or ropes, so why would you burn it in the first 2 seconds of the round? Instead, wall at the top of mail and watch the cross to ropes from on top of your wall. This makes it so people can't lurk up mail on a B push, and you also still have all the information on whether someone crossed towards rope or not. If the mid wall's getting broken every round, there's a much better way to adapt in your games and still get value from your 400 credit ability. Another very common mistake I see is when players get stalled by enemy utility at a choke point and they just stare at a smoke. And the problem with this is if you wait, it allows the enemy team to rotate and then you're forced to push a stacked site. When the enemy team attempts to delay your push with utility, you've got 3 options. Either you push through it, you try to beat the rotates, or you rotate yourself. You can also fake a rotation and try to make the enemy team rotate back, but you need to communicate this with your team so they don't just stick around making noise and the fake rotate might actually work. Speaking of rotations, a mistake that is way too common is over-rotating. I know sometimes we hear our teammates communicate to us that it's A or it's B after hearing one person, but knowing when to rotate is important so you don't give the enemy team a free bomb site. This is where paying attention to your minimap comes in handy. If you spot 4 to 5 enemies on your minimap, it's safe to assume it's a good rotate. But on certain maps like Bind where the enemies can teleport and rotate faster, it's typically good for at least one player to anchor the site. The surefire way to know if you should rotate is if you have control of the enemy spike. Anytime your team has control of it, you should be rotating to stack that area of the map since they need to get it back to win the round. Make sure to be mindful of whether or not they have an Omen ultimate though, because they may use that ultimate to grab the spike and rotate. This was just a glimpse of what we have to offer though. Over at SkillCapped, we've got you covered. Dozens of tailor-made courses that teach you everything you need to know about climbing in Valorant. We'll teach you everything you need to know about mastering your mechanics so you can start playing at an immortal level in no time. Along with this, we also upload tons of VOD reviews every week that our coaches record from looking at players just like you. So rather than just paying for one $200 coaching session on another platform, you can get access to hundreds of sessions for just a few bucks. Not only that, but our coaches are also at the ready in our Discord to take a look at your gameplay and tell you exactly what your issues are, if by chance you don't find value from all the other things we offer on our site. Click that link below for a discount on your purchase today. Other than that, we here at SkillCapped want to thank you all for watching. Thanks so much, and we'll catch you in the next one.